seyirciler, bugün yanımızda önemli bir konuğumuz var. Sayın Timothy Ash. Timothy Ash, Türkiye'yi çok yakından takip eden, gelişen piyasaları çok yakından takip eden bir isim. Blue Bay Gelişen Ekonomiler Stratejisi, aynı zamanda Chatham House'da çalışıyor öğretim görevlisi olarak. Şu an yanımda kendisi. Hem Bakan Mehmet Şimşek'in içeride yaptığı sunumun detaylarını sormak istiyoruz. Özellikle yatırımcılar açısından ne önem arz ettiğini sormak istiyoruz. Hello, Tim.
Hi, nice to see you.
Very nice to see you too as well. You've been following the Turkish market for quite a long time, over 30 years, I think. So I'd like to know, like, what is your view of the Turkish economic outlook, especially after listening Minister Şimşek's statement in London?
Yeah, sure. Well, Turkey always has quite a few positives, right? Good demographics, good location, it's a strong manufacturing base. Very dynamic, pro-business culture, entrepreneurial, great banks, public finances, low debt ratio, I think sub 30%, 25% actually. So those kind of positives. The challenges have typically in recent years been about macro financial stability, right? So, we had that unorthodox period, resulted in high inflation, loss of pressure on the exchange rate, reserve loss. Then we had a change, obviously, in 23, Şimşek, new team of the central bank. We saw a return to orthodoxy, tighter policy, and that was really successful, right? I mean, we saw 100 billion reserve accumulation, a drawdown of the protected FX deposit base or accounts, again, remarkable, and Turkey on a improving credit trajectory. And then obviously recently we've had political events in Turkey that have been quite destabilizing to the macro. We saw a lot of reserve loss, a lot of foreigners pulled their money out around concerns around that. Central bank responded in the right way. It hiked policy rates. It seems to have stabilized things. And I think maybe now we're a bit of a turning point in a positive way, right? I think rates are at a high enough level. I think foreigners are going to come back in. Last week, I think we saw some inflows in the Turk GB market. Maybe this week also we've seen some reserve accumulation again from the central bank. So, and we're now in obviously seasonals are favourable. Tourism season coming on board now. Global factors maybe a bit more supportive also in terms of lower oil prices, etc. And then there are the sort of geopolitical positives, and also some of the domestic situation could be a bit more better. I mean, the Kurdish peace process, potentially big positive. If it happens, if it's delivered, they'll see a lot of investment into the region, a lot of the stresses of the political stresses of the Kurdish issue, both domestically in Turkey and also in terms of regional geopolitics, kind of helps. Syria, recently, obviously, we have the Trump visit to the Middle East, lifting of sanctions, Syria's direction of travel kind of positive, and obviously hopes of a Russia-UK peace process, obviously, in Turkey itself, hopefully this week. So, ups and downs, right?
Has there been some talks around the peace process? Because we know that the minister Şimşek has also tweeted something about the peace process, and now that and it was saying that now that Turkey can focus fully with its own matters, and the prosperity and peace. So, what is your kind of expectation? Because this had happened before, and now it's a renewed peace process, and this time it seems to be going a bit better.
Yeah, there's a lot of peace processes in the world, right? I assume we're talking about the Kurdish peace process,
yes,
as opposed to the Syrian, the Russia-Ukraine, plenty of others, right? Look, I mean, no, he obviously highlighted that there's optimism. It's potentially a big win for Turkey if this happens. I guess maybe what's a little bit different this time around is, it's not happening in a vacuum. I mean, there is the Syrian peace process itself that perhaps drives also the Kurdish peace. Domestic politics in Turkey are potentially driving this process forward as well. Obviously, probably. Erdogan is looking for constitutional change, reaching out to the Democratic Party, may help that process of constitutional reform in Turkey. So, I mean, there are a lot of factors that perhaps are working this time around in favour of a lasting process.
There you go. And the other question is, like, we've seen a lot since the start of the January and after Trump take over the presidential palace. What I was like wondering is like all this like trade tariffs and hikes and everything. So how this is going to affect like emerging economies and also particularly for Turkey? Like, do you think the Turkey could be the winner of that? Because before the trade, the Turkey has been able to shift itself to different markets and stuff. Do you think that it can benefit from it, or what are the risks and opportunities?
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of moving parts there, right?
Yes.
I mean, look, if trade wars mean slower global growth, that probably means lower commodity prices, and that's Turkey's a beneficiary because it's an importer of oil, so that's a win. If trade wars mean nearshoring, friendshoring, all those kind of things. Again, Turkey's probably a winner there, right? Particularly in terms of Europe. Putin, Freudian slip. Trump.
Okay.
Trump and Erdogan seem to have a good personal relationship. So Turkey's clearly not been a big target in terms of tariffs, so it may well get preferential treatment. Turkey seems to be a really important geopolitical player, and again, that's why perhaps Trump is willing to treat Turkey relatively favourably. I mean, central in terms of the Russia-Ukraine peace process, obviously central to what's going on in Syria itself. So, I think Turkey is relatively well placed globally. And actually also, I mean, the one major positive, I think, ultimately for Turkey is what's going on in terms of European security. Weakening of NATO means that Europe has to think about an autonomous defence capability. There's a time problem for Europe in terms of it is dependent on US military technology until it can develop its own technology. Turkey can provide a stopgap. It is a major producer of military kit. It can help, help Europe have that, moonshot to the point that it has its own autonomous defence capability. And I think there are opportunities for defence cooperation, right? I mean, Europe has the defence technology, or is in many areas, right? It has the science to produce the Patriots, the European Patriot, the European HIMARS or ATACMS. Europe can do it. But it lacks the manufacturing capability, and Turkey has that. So Turkey can enable Europe to manufacture defence military kit quickly. Turkey obviously wants technology transfer, right? It wants its own autonomous defence capability. So I think there's lots of room in the global environment we're in for Turkey to get closer to Europe. I mean, it's a two-way flow, right? Europe has to be welcoming Turkey. I mean, Turkey and Europe's history are a difficult one, right? I think that, Europe needs to put its past prejudices behind it on Turkey and understand that in a different European security environment, Turkey is linchpin to European security, right? And, in recent months we've seen, the landmark deal, Baikal, Leonardo. Hopefully we see other deals, defence-related deals between Turkey and European companies.
Do you also think that now there are different kind of with all this shape of geopolitics and there are new countries coming together or kind of being more in communication with each other, because it seems like after the shuffle of Trump with its especially NATO, that we and the trade hikes as well, the tariff hikes as well, we have seen there are different channels of communication between the countries trying to find another way. I mean, we've recently seen, for example, UK-India trade deal, and Turkey is trying to expand the trade deal with UK as well. So I'd like to ask about that too. So we're almost we're seeing different countries getting together in creating different alliances.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously Turkey has its own interests, right? But in the end, Europe has a common interest in security, right? I would argue that the biggest threat to European security is Russia. So I think, and actually I was at a conference only this week at Oxford University, looking at the Black Sea and different countries and priorities and things like that. And people questioned, will Turkey have to choose, for example, between the Western Alliance and Russia? I would argue it's a no-brainer. Russia offers Turkey nothing. doesn't offer finance, investment. Its military technology is low quality. It's been proven in the war in Ukraine. The natural partner for Turkey, I would still think, would be Europe. The choice, I guess, for Turkey is, and for Europe, is either cement that relationship and build on that relationship, or Turkey will continue to develop its own autonomous defense capability and military and security capability, right? We'll see. It depends really how open Europe is. I mean, really, does Europe really understand the scale of the threat from Russia, right? The existential threat from Russia to Europe, and
That might bring them
if it
together.
does, then Turkey is a natural partner. Now, if Europe has its head in the sand, then Europe may not have such a great secure future, right? But anyway, I mean, Turkey, has to look out for its own interests. Obviously, it's about balance. It's been very successful in balancing its different countries and different sources of power, all those kind of things. And sure, I'm sure Turkey will continue to want to have a good relationship with the US, with Europe, with Ukraine, and obviously, let's see where the relationship with Russia goes.